welcome the very first presenter from the Advocates team, Wu Win. And Wu Win, you will have 10 minutes to inform your presentation, and your time starts.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Our supervisor and all the panel members. I would like to begin the debate today by. So as you all know, the topic about debate, in other words, the notion is should English become the second official language in Vietnam by 2025? So I would like to commence the debate by giving you guys the very basic information about our topic. So the first thing is several basic definitions, which we gathered from the Cambridge Dictionary. So a language can only be considered an official language when it is approved by the government. It is used as a means of instruction in schools and institutions, as well as used in legal and official documents. Meanwhile, second language is a language that a person can speak besides their mother tongue, besides the language that they naturally learn. So in other words, the second official language is the language besides the mother tongue that is approved by the government, widely used in schools and official as well as legal documents. So in terms of the use of English as a second official language, 57 countries in the world has recognized English as their second official language. Most of them are the past colonies of England, of Britain. While in Asia alone, we have kind of four typical representatives of countries which consider English as their second official language, which is Singapore, Malaysia, India, and the Philippines. So Taiwan is one of the countries in Asia which is heading towards making English their official language next year. And Vietnam has also bringing up several proposals of following the steps of Taiwan as well. So as you all know, we are in the four team which we advocate this proposal. So I would like to start our arguments. So the first argument that we give in favor of making English the second official language in Vietnam is in terms of education benefits. Specifically, it means that when we make English an official language, second language in Vietnam, Vietnamese people may have access to the latest developments in the world. Well, I would like to elaborate on my viewpoints by first elaborating and explaining the spread of English in the academic world. So, according to the website, The History of English, two-thirds scientific papers are published in English. And according to Science Citation Index, they reported that 95% of their articles are in English. And 70 to 80% of internet content are also in English. That is to say that the use of English has been very, very common in different fields in the world. So, however, when it comes to new development, Vietnamese is undoubtedly behind other countries, maybe years, decades, or even centuries behind other developed countries. As a result, what is new and is discovered by other developed countries, and what is new and discovered by Vietnamese people may be previously applied and used and discovered by other countries years ago, years before us. So this can be seen in some of the example of collaborative learning, one of the learning principles which was founded and discovered by Vygotsky and Piaget in Russia in the 19th century, according to Adam Rani. But according to Nguyen and Taylor and Albert, Vietnam only concerned about this teaching principle in the 20s. This is also aligned with the idea of Wu Guangguo, the CEO of iVietNam, who said that commercial contents are often written in English first. So when commercial contents so it takes years of translation for Vietnamese people to get access to this new approach of commerce, while another approach of commerce has been applied by another country. That means we are always behind other country. So by this, I mean that Vietnamese people, it is necessary that we need to understand the most commonly used language in the world, which is English, in order to keep ourselves updated to the world's latest developments. By that means we will kind of build the knowledge gap between us and other developed countries. So the second benefits of making English the second official language in Vietnam will be presented by them.
So good afternoon, everybody.
So,
Okay. Sorry.
your presentation lasts 6 minutes, and that's fair enough. And now let's come to the first presenter from the opposition.
Hello everyone.
Team.
Hello everyone. My name is Linh Anh and I'm the first presenter from the opposing team. So today I'm in charge of giving you the definitions and also our first point of our argument against the motion, should English be made an official language in Vietnam by 2025? Okay, so although we have provided us with the background information, I also want to state some background information. First, I would like to provide with you the definition of official language. According to Concise Oxford Companion to the English language, an official language is a language given a special legal status in a particular country, state, or other jurisdiction. Typically, a country's official language refers to the language used in government. Some Asian countries that can be a model for Vietnam to follow, which are Singapore, Malaysia, and Philippines. Given a hypothesis that English language becomes an official language in Vietnam, what will happen? English will be used beside Vietnamese language in all fields, from government, education, public health, to finance and tourism. Next, please. Every Vietnamese citizen should be able to use English independently, fluently, like as a native. All the science should be in two languages, Vietnamese and English. All schools should provide a bilingual curriculum, and also all teachers should be proficiency in not only English but also a specific subject. Well, so in this if Vietnam wants to make English become an official language beside Vietnamese, we must adopt a policy to give this language an official legal status. So here comes a question: even when the Prime Minister decides to implement a new language policy by 2025, can Vietnam immediately afford to apply it practically? So before I introduce my point, I would like to make it clear that we acknowledge all the benefits that this policy can bring about in the long run. However, we do not believe that to implement this policy by 2025 is feasible and necessary. So here comes our first point. Vietnam history and social background hinder the possibility of this policy being adopted by 2025. You can see the table. I provide you with the comparison between the history between Singapore, Malaysia, and Vietnam. When setting Singapore and Malaysia as an example to adopt the policy, Vietnam is one step behind due to the social background, and Singapore and Malaysia is where an English-speaking community had existed even before the policy to make it an official language was adopted. come back to the 20th century, Singapore and Malaysia and also other countries used to be the British colonies. So which make it easier for this country to adopt the policy to make English become an official language due to the influence of the British colonization and also the English language during the colonial period. And compared to Vietnam, before 1945, French language was recognized as an official language in Vietnam because it was governed by France. And after 1945, it's the Russian that took the position due to the Soviet Union socialism influence, right? And while Southern Vietnam was influenced by the English language due to the periods when the America ruled this region. So the difference in the social background creates a gap between the mindset of Vietnamese people and other countries' people, like younger Singaporeans grow up as native English speaker, because English being the first language when they acquire as a child. They will increasingly take ownership of English, and with the language being core to their identity, the role of English there continue to be reinforced, and an English-speaking community always exists there. The gap is also true to Vietnam, where you can see that those who live in southern Vietnam, where used to be the American colony, are more proficient in English than those who live in northern Vietnam, where was not American or British colony. According to VN Express, in 2017 and 2018, students in Ho Chi Minh has gained the highest score in English over Vietnam. And it proves that the difference in social background has a great impact on the priority of language used in the region. And that Vietnam has never owned an English-speaking community is a disadvantage compared to the model of Singapore and Malaysia. On the other hand, talking about the importance of an English-speaking community, the Minister of Information and Communication, Nguyễn Mạnh Hùng, said that to have English as an official language, the key is to create an English-speaking community in which Vietnamese people want and feel the need to use this language, and also Vietnamese citizens should reach at least B1 level to adopt these policies. To conclude, while Singapore and Malaysia continue to maintain the status of English language and encourage their citizens to use English, in Vietnam there has never existed an English-speaking community, which means it's much more difficult for Vietnam to follow the model of Singapore and Malaysia, and to promote an English-speaking community for such a limited period of time. I say it's much more challenging for Vietnam to adopt this policy, but I don't say that we can't. However, our group believes that the following reason, which will be presented by my line, will show that the policy is educationally and economically unfeasible by 2025. Thank you. So that's the end of my talk.
Thank you. 7.5 minutes of presentation. Before we move into the advocacy team, I just want to remind you one thing, that before you speak, I will. Yeah. You can't wait for my seat. And now moving to the second presenter. Let's come to done. You will have 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to speak.
So good afternoon everybody. So on behalf of our team today, I'm going to present our second argument for the policy, which is the economic benefits of this policy. And our team believes that the language would enable Vietnamese economy to link up with the global economy. Okay, so the very first reason for our assertion is the spread of English. And the fact is that 80 countries already have English as their official language, and it is also widely spoken in another 100 countries. And as the fastest spreading language in human history, English is now spoken at a useful level by 1.75 billion people, and that is 1 in every forest, a very huge number, according to The Economist. And English sets its status as the language of international communication and commerce. In the statistics that of all the companies that can be described as global around the world, 25% of global companies have adopted English as the official corporate language. Okay, so yeah, and it is predicted that English there is a huge business power behind the countries and the people that speak English. Okay, so based on these facts and statistics, we think that the promotion English as the second official language will lead to 3 desirable results. The first one is that it will make Vietnamese workforce more marketable domestically and internationally. Yeah. Which means that they will have more employment opportunities both on the national and international scale, which will lead to a raise in the standards of living and the consumption as well, which is beneficial for the economy. And the second thing is that it will enable national business to meet global expansion and business needs. Yeah, to be specific, national companies will get more involved in the joint programs and activities with their foreign counterparts, and they will find it easier to gain new information and knowledge, as well as get the latest updates in the market trends. As we have mentioned, most of the commercial contents are often originally written in English. And the actual situation in Vietnam now is that even an email from a US company is translating into Vietnamese, and so does all the replies and all the additional messages. And as you might guess, these very simple exchanges can drag on for days, which can bog down everything. Okay, so if we want our companies, if we want Vietnam to have many truly global companies, then English is the key. And we also think that with English as the official language and the language of a company, then that company will find it easier to improve their brand and services identity. And the very last reason is that the policy will help us to attract foreign investment. Adam Moore is a management and investment consultant who has been working in Southeast Asian markets for 12 years, and he has conducted a 100-hour interview with many senior executives of foreign companies working across different occupations and countries in Vietnam. And he comes to the conclusion that the level of English among employees was cited more often than any other issues in leading a business in Vietnam. Okay, so if we make English become official, it means that Vietnamese citizens will have a more favorable environment to pick up English, and it will be a huge attractive point for the investors because they want to capitalize on the labor source of Vietnam, which have very 2 competitive attributes. One is the cheap cost, and 2 is their fluency in English. Yeah, so to better illustrate our viewpoints, we want to take Singapore as an example. Yeah. Despite all the difficulties in adopting English as an official language in the first place, Singapore persists with its policy, and it has now achieved very good results. So in the early days, the Singaporean people, they tried to encourage English-speaking business to set up its shops in Singapore, which provided employment for the masses. And from these humble beginnings, they have now developed into a financial and banking hub in Asia. And their workers are in high demand in very high skills industries all over the world. And it is these bilingual workers that have to connect English-speaking businesses with Singaporean businesses and many other Asian emerging economies like China or India. Yeah. Okay, so to sum up, I just want to say that if we adopt English as the second official language, then it will help the man to become highly adept with the forces of globalization. And by 2025, Vietnam is still undergoing a dramatic phase of transformation. And I think that if we want to make really dramatic changes in our economic and also our social developments, then I think that English is the key.
And now moving to the Okay, so moving on to the second presenter of the opening team, Megan, your chance now. You have 5 to 10 minutes to finish up.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Megan and I am the second constructive speaker of the opposing team. And in my speech today, firstly, I would like to restate our team's viewpoints, and then secondly, add to Ming's part with our team's argument. Okay. So first of all, our team believe that English should not be made an official language in Vietnam by 2025. Why? Because we believe that in just 5 years, it is unfeasible and unnecessary for Vietnam to adopt English as an official language in our country. Previously, Minh Anh has provided you with a sub-argument related to the contextual unfeasibility. Now I will provide you with 3 more sub-arguments. The first one is that Vietnamese low English competency makes it unfeasible for English to become an official language in Vietnam by 2025, according to the definition and the background information provided by Minh Anh. If a language becomes official in a country, the citizen of that country.
To the second part, which is rebuttal of today's debate. Attention, everybody. So, to start the second session, I would like to welcome Ms. Thanh Hiếu Hà Anh to raise your opinion. And you will have 3 to 5 minutes to present your opinion. Your time starts now.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and warm greetings to everyone present here right now. First, before the rebuttal, I would like to clarify some points. Previously, Ms. G asked us about the scores that we mentioned in the first part, as well as the benchmark that we based it on, and the age that should reach the B1 level English. So first about scores. So it is from the we are mentioning the scores of the national entrance exams. And about the benchmark. So we believe that the closest thing we have our country has right now is has right now to reach the English as an official language is the English Project 2020. And so the benchmark should be set right here, the B1 level in English, is based on that project, which stated that people who have graduated from high school should have already reached the B1 level. And we also support this since as stated before in the definition, B1, the official language has to be used in legal documents. And so if people do not have a level in B1, it will be very difficult for them to clearly understand the laws and regulations of our own countries. And after they have already graduated from high school, they can be considered citizens of the country. And if they do not reach that kind of level, it would be a bad front for Vietnam to promote ourselves to other countries. And so now we'll reach the rebuttal part of our team. So first, I want to talk about the fields in which English will be implemented once it becomes an official language. So our team believes that besides being used in legal documents, it should also be implemented in real life for a more practical usage. So the other team mentioned that the spread of English nowadays, and by implementing English as the official language, we will get more access to knowledge and we will get more access to new development. However, if we do not use English in real life, and if we only use it in legal documents, how can we be so sure that our citizens will get a better understanding of English, aside from like this theoretical use in schools and without application in real life? And that would be a very sad reality to expect. The second point I would like to say is that the other team used Singapore as a lot of examples for both the access as well as the economic development. However, we must acknowledge that Singapore, unlike Vietnam right now, has a very clear goal and a clear road to have made English become an official language. So, for the evidence, so first and foremost, in 1996, Singapore first made it compulsory for secondary schools to offer a second language, which meant that vernacular schools needed to offer English and vice versa. And they also have persistent and consistent policy changes to accommodate the use of English and to encourage it. And then in 1987, English finally became the medium of instruction for all schools in Singapore. And the whole government also made extensive effort to encourage the use of English by raising a race quota policy in which in public housing they have to ensure that in the real estate there would be residents from different races to prevent the formation of any ethnic enclaves, which meant that people had to use English for communication. So it was an effort for decades and an effort by both the government and by the Ministry of Education. And considering this, you were stating that only in like 5 years, Vietnam can reach this kind of level of success that Singapore can reach after like decades and after so many persistent changes to the policy. And my last point rebuttal would be to ask whether English should even become an official language at all. We believe that English can still remain as just a foreign language and still gain the success that we have projected. So we'd like to reference the EF English Proficiency Index for 2018, so in this index, Nordic countries such as, which means like Northern Europe countries such as Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, 4 out of 5 countries, are like in the top 10 of the rankings in proficiency, like the highest level of proficiency, but they do not employ English as an official language. But how can they still be so good at English and be so successful in their ventures to the global economy? So this raises an important point whether English will remain as a foreign language or just become an official language. That is all for my rebuttal, and thank you for listening.
5 minutes. And now let's come to the affirmative team. Welcome with me. You also have 5 minutes to raise your hand. The time starts now.
Okay, so good afternoon everyone. So I'm the very first rebuttal of our team, and I'd like to talk about the argument that was made by Minh Anh. Okay, so you say that history and social background did affect the competency of Vietnamese, the English competency of Vietnamese people, right? However, as we all know that from looking back at our history, we were colonized by China for more than 1,000 years. However, the Vietnamese language is still preserved. And we are not and the fact that we are not good at Chinese. So, and the second thing is that for Singapore, okay, so in 1966, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, yeah, he applied a policy that made English the official language of Singapore, and at that time, 80% of population of Singaporeans is China, and they speak mainly Chinese at home, which means that English also is not Singaporeans was not very good at English at that time. Okay, so for all the reasons, I think that the fact that we were colonized by any kind of country does not really affect the ability to learn a new language. Okay, and okay, so and the second thing is that when you said that in only 5 years, next 5 years, we are not able to learn English and make English the second official language of Vietnam. I think that nowadays we should focus mainly on the young millennials, the new generation, and by the next 5 years, they are believed to be able to speak English fluently and okay, and they hope.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, so I think that we should focus mainly on the young generation first, for them to speak English, to use English fluently in daily life, and then in the long run we can focus more on the older generation, and as well with the chance that Vietnamese are getting better and better at English, we believe that the competency of Vietnamese people, English competency of Vietnamese people is also getting better. And okay, so to conclude, I think that for the fact that Ho Chi Minh was colonized by America, it does not prove fully that we are the Northern Vietnamese people are better than Southern, because the tests in Vietnam are mainly grammar based, and according to a TED talk that I have seen recently, it is said that not every people who are good at grammar can speak English well, and there are those who can speak English very confidently, however very bad at test taking in Vietnam. So I think that for that fact, whether or not we are colonized by a British
English-speaking countries does not really affect the ability of citizens to learn a new language.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For 5 minutes. And now let's come to the opposing team.
Assign the time next because I see slide show later. Yes. Cô đừng phải em được không ạ? Good.
Okay.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. So now, on behalf of the opposing team, I would like to rebut some of my counterparts on the affirmative team. First is to Uyên. So in your speech, you have mentioned the collaborative learning as an example showing that Vietnam is behind other countries, which means that we should follow in other countries' footsteps, which means that it's time for us to adopt English as an official language, right? Okay? But I personally think that this is a false analogy because collaborative learning is just a learning theory, and the adoption of a learning theory may have an impact on education sector itself. Why the formalization of a foreign language could have an impact on every aspect of a country relating to economy or society and everything. Because of the scale of the country is larger, it's really large. And another thing is, I think that it's not necessary for Vietnam to formalize English as an official language. Just stop at the foreign language. Why? Now let's take a look at the slide. Okay, not this template, however. Okay, so the template, the slide, the next slide. Okay, so not every nation which formalized English as an official language is a developed one. Out of 198 countries in the world, 54 countries formalized English as an official language. And out of those 54 countries, 24 countries lie in Africa, 14 lie in America and Australia, and the other 4 belongs to Europe. However, as a matter of fact, 24 African countries where English is spoken as an official language are not as prosperous as those in European and Asia, in which English do not necessarily become an official language. According to Legatum Institute in 2018, and in contrast, even though some of those 24 countries, African countries, belong to the least prosperous countries in the world, and for example, for Pakistan, they stay at the position 136, Nigeria at 129, and Zimbabwe at 118. And now, on the slide, as you can see, only 3 and 4 out of top 10 happiest and most prosperous countries formalize English as an official language. For example, countries as Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Ireland. And on the list, Scandinavian countries like Holland, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, where English is only a foreign language, enjoy top rankings in both lists. So I think it's not necessary for Vietnam to adopt English as an official language, because we can follow in the footsteps of Scandinavian countries where English is spoken as a foreign language only. Because one more evidence is that in the book Why Nations Fail, The Origin of Power, Prosperity and Poverty, published in 2012, the author Darren Aclamoglu and James Robinson proved that economic and politics institutions rather than language are underlying decisive factors making a country rich or poor, not the language. And another person I would like to rebut is them. As you can say, as you have said, promoting English as the official language in Vietnam can attract the investment from foreign countries, right?
Okay, and I think that in Vietnam context specifically, English now is not the only competitive age compared to the other three languages. First, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. Why do I say so? Move on to the next slide. Okay, the next slide. This is the statistic according to accumulated collected in August in 2018. Top Korea and Japan are the two FDI behemoths of Vietnam, and they are the two strategic diplomatic countries for us to work in tandem when it comes to economic benefits. And the top 5 biggest foreign entrepreneurs in Vietnam are Samsung from Korea, Honda, Toyota, Canon from Japan. So which means if graduates now with Korean and Japanese competency can have the same employment prospect as those fluent in English in Vietnam context. So and also when graduates they are fluent in Japanese and Korean. When you work for the countries with
30 seconds left.
What happened? 30 seconds left. Okay. So I mean, when Vietnamese people work for countries with work for countries or companies based in Japan or Korea, they can have the same employment opportunities as those fluent in English, and also attract the investment from those countries because we can show them that we are fluent in their languages and show a diplomatic, a positive diplomatic relationship between the two countries. That's all.
And as the last presenter of your group, because you don't hear what I said, you have to summarize all the procedure, all the argument that your team.
Is this required in the course guide?
Because the last debate is now let's come to the last presenter from the opportunity team. You have 5 minutes to speak.
And should he summarize also?
Yes.
Summarize.
I'll give you 2.
No, it's not his responsibility. So let's say each group will have maybe 1.5 minutes to 2 more minutes, and whoever can do it. Okay, you should compromise in your group. So you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Your 5 minutes starts now.
I like to rebut my ideas that often formalized English in Vietnam is unnecessary because not everyone is in the position of learning a new language. So first, I'd like to inform you a little bit about the situation of Singapore. At the time that they decided to apply English as an official language. At that time, there was different communities of people speaking different languages in Singapore. For example, there are Chinese and Malaysian and some Indians. And of course, the population of these communities, they are not all ready to learn a new language, which is English. And so therefore, Singapore decided to focus on the students by setting up the English courses in schools, and there are even English schools in Singapore. And recently, Taiwan also decided to Taiwan has also decided to issue a policy that that will introduce English as an official language, and I believe they also have the same position. In fact, every country have that position. So so I think the solution here would be aiming at the students, and we can start by introducing English courses in school and change the way that English are being taught, and also according to the EF index of English proficiency, the adults in Vietnam has reached the level of B1, which is adequate to apply this policy. And I believe with the combination of the proficiency level of adults as well as the future improvement of students' English proficiency, in 5 more years, this policy is feasible, and the young people who are the future workforce, they would benefit a lot from this policy, and which would lead to great beneficials for our country. I still have my remarks.